Hey everybody, I've had a couple of questions from people on the best way to do this thing that I'm going to show you, and I'm just going to go over several different ways to mount things on your car and drill the holes accurately for the fasteners. So you might have noticed if you watched any of the other videos, I like using regular threaded fasteners in my car, and I use nutserts a lot. So a nutsert is basically a rivet nut that is threaded inside. Your fastener screws into it, and this rivets into the vehicle's chassis, and it becomes a nice threaded hole, and it's nice and secure. One of the problems with doing this is the holes that you drill to put the nutsert in, and then use the riveting tool to rivet it in. Those holes have to be really accurately placed. Otherwise, you're going to run into a misalignment of when you go to put your screw in, something's on an angle, or something's like, you get, like a 16th or a 32nd of an inch off, and the screw doesn't want to start, and so the holes need to be pretty accurate. So there are lots of ways to make those holes where you drill the hole for the rivet a really accurate position, and I'm just going to show you a few of them that I use, and it varies from one application to another. Sometimes one works better, sometimes another. Depends on how much access you've got and where things are, and if you're doing a lip stand on the floor mat trying to do it, and there's a bunch of different ways to do it. So the first one that I'll show you is using a transfer punch. So this is a transfer punch, and basically it's just a specific diameter shaft that fits through the hole that you're trying to put your fastener in, and it fits snugly, so there's not a lot of play in here. There's maybe 10 thousandths clearance, and then the transfer punch has a point on the end, and you can use that to mark the center of the hole, and you can do it just on a regular piece of cardboard, just like this. Now, these holes that I'm doing here are tapered so that the screw fits in them flush like that. And on these ones, I can use a transfer punch because the material's thick enough that it guides the transfer punch before it's not in the taper. The transfer punch is in the center of the hole. If this thickness here wasn't thick enough, you couldn't really use this method on a tapered hole because there's nothing to hold the transfer punch in place on the taper. You have to make sure the transfer punch is in the actual hole. So with this, it'll just barely work. And I'll show you how one way to do that. I just use a piece of cardboard and hold the thing that you're gonna mount. Hold it down tightly so it doesn't move. Put a little mark in there. Move it over. Keep holding it down so it doesn't move. Put a little mark in there, and then now you have the distance between your hole centers. And if we look at it with a caliper, we can kind of look at those and go, that distance is about 122 millimeters, give or take, within half a millimeter of 122 millimeters. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, some people will just hold this up and put the drill bit in here and try and drill a hole. Well, sometimes that's okay, but like in this one, there's a little electrical connector here. I don't want to run into that with the drill bit, and the drill bit can wander around, and you know, I don't prefer that method, although I've used it and sometimes it works fine. But another way to do this is to simply measure the thing that you're trying to mount. So let's find the diameter of one of these holes, and it's probably going to be somewhere around probably 5 millimeters. And I'm doing this in millimeters and metric simply because yeah, it's 5.08 millimeters, or as close as we're measuring here to 5 millimeters. I'm using it in millimeters because if I switch it to fractions of an inch, okay, it's exactly 0.2, or if we look at it as a fraction, it's 13/64. So whichever method you use is fine. I'm just going to use millimeters. So 5 millimeters, and then we'll measure across the inside. So from here, the inside of this hole, to the inside of this hole, okay? And so when we do that, we measure, let me get this as close to dead on as we can here. It's 117 millimeters. So we know that the inside edges of the hole here and here are 117 millimeters apart. We know that the diameter of one hole is 5 millimeters, but we have two holes. So if we split that in half, we have 2.5 millimeters to the center and 2.5 millimeters to the center there, so 5 total. So we go 117 plus 5, or just 117 plus the diameter of the hole, equals our 122 millimeters. You can do the same thing and use the outside surface of the hole, and then you would subtract the diameter. So, you know, again, we can do that. We can measure the outside edges of the holes like that, and this is probably going to be, yep, 127. So we subtract the 5 and we're back at 122 millimeters. So I mean, it's really that simple. If you want to really find the centers of a mounting hole, it's, you know, you can use a transfer punch method. There's various different ways you can do it, but these are just a few of the ways that I use normally. I use the measurement probably the most frequently, because what I'll do is I'll set my calipers at 122 millimeters, and I'll just go over to the car and I'll use these 2 points to mark the drill locations on the car sheet metal. And so that's what we're going to do next, and I'll take you over there and kind of show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so we're set up here in the car, and a few things that I think are pretty common sense, but I'll just mention them anyway. You know, it's always good to make sure you know what you're drilling into. I know for a fact there is nothing behind this panel. It goes straight through to the interior of the car. There's no wiring or plumbing or anything in the car as yet on the inside, so I know that I'm not going to run into anything with a drill bit back there, so nothing to worry about there. So the first thing I do is we've determined the distance between the screw holes. So now what I want to do is I'm going to take my sensor block, and I like bright light. Old Eyes like bright light, so I'm a member of the Old Eyes Club. Why the bright orange zip tie? These are reusable zip ties. You push this little tang and you can take this thing off and put it back on. And so I use reusable zip ties everywhere I know that it's not going to be permanent, and I just doing it to get things out of the way for the time being. So that's what that's all about. I've had some questions as well. Let me get this situated here. I've had some questions as well as to some of the lights that I use, and they're nothing too fancy. This light is from Streamlight, and it's just what I happened to find on sale one day on Amazon. It doesn't, you know, Harbor Freight sells some good inexpensive lighting that works well. So, you know, you don't have to buy the Streamlight one. I did it because it was on sale. So anyway, I want to, you know, where is this going to go? And I think it's going to live right about here. I've got just enough room for everything. This is going to be oil pressure. This is going to be the MAP sensor on the intake manifold, and this is going to be fuel pressure. And all of these feed back through this harness to the Holley ECU, and I can monitor them on the Holley 12.3 dash. Then this little electrical connection up here will go to the coolant temperature sensor on the motor. So I want to get this thing kind of situated, and one of the things that I like to do is I want to make sure it's level. And I just nothing, it just bugs me when I look at a really nice car and I see, you know, something mounted, you know, like that. Like it just, like you know, take the extra 18 seconds and level it up, and, you know, make it look like, you know, you care about it, because we do care about it. Now, where do we want this? I think I'd like to come this way a little bit more. And I've got to mind the interference here. So I think that's going to work. And see, that is now not level, so we're going to make it level. Right about there. So this will give me a rough idea of where the holes are going to go, and I do mean a rough idea. Some people use this method to find the spots to drill the holes. I don't prefer that. So what I'm going to do is, now that I kind of know where this is going to go, I'm going to take this out of here again. Get it out of the way. So you can see I've got my two marks. Now I know that they've got to be 122 millimeters apart. So hopefully I can get my caliper, and I can't. See, the caliper runs into interference there, so we'll turn it over and we'll do it this way. So those are going to be my center marks. So what I'll do here is I will mark this edge, and then your pen doesn't write. Oh, for goodness sakes. And mark this edge. And then I just have to remember that I've got to drill slightly to the inside of that mark. Now, you know, if you're off by a half a millimeter or something, that's not going to be an issue. We're not working with tolerances down to, you know, 10 thousandths or something like that. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are right in the ballpark. Okay, so that's where the holes go from a horizontal perspective. And then what I'll do is I'll basically eyeball the level on those holes and make sure that we're still level. So center of that one, and right about there. Now you see how that moved up a little bit? If we didn't have the level, you know, we wouldn't have got that. So now I know I'm going to drill right there and right there. So I like to start with a small drill bit. I think the drill size for a 1032 nutsert is 19/64, but I'm just starting with a smaller drill bit because it's easier to get an accurate location. And it's also easier to double check your measurement. So what I'm going to do, just going to double check my measurement with calipers. There, yeah, we're going to be dead on, I think. Okay, so now that we have our pilot holes made, again, I like to make sure that things are on the money. I think we're going to be fine. So then we can move up to the larger drill bit. And this is, 19/64. That's one thing about nutserts. If you're using nutserts, you do need to have a selection of drill bits probably in 64th increments, because if you drill a hole too big, the nutsert doesn't really like to hold as well, and you know, so it's good to have drill bits that go in 1/64th increments. This drill bit is dull, and I can just tell because it's not cutting, it's not doing what it's supposed to do, although it doesn't feel dull. But I'm going to get a different drill bit and come back and do this again with a sharp drill bit.
12 seconds later.
Okay, we've got a sharper drill bit, and I'm using a step drill bit, which makes a nice rounder hole. Probably should have used it to begin with, but anyway, here we go. Yeah, you see when the drill bit's sharp, it just doesn't take much effort. And there we go. We have the holes made for the nutserts. Now, all we have to do is take our nutsert tool, and these are pretty straightforward. I put them basically so the threads are, so the mandrel is like even with the end of the nutsert. It's a preference thing. You can kind of put it wherever you want, but I generally put it right about there. and then you just put the nutsert into the hole, and you see how well that fits in that hole. And then you just basically give this a squeeze and keep tightening it up to remove the thickness. And I think we pretty much got this one done. And there it is. So now we do it again. Where is the other one? So again, we just basically set that up so that the mandrel is flush with the end of the nutsert. Stick it in the hole, make sure it's seated all the way, give her a good squeeze. And there it is. Done. So now, with any luck, we can fit our sensor block in here and just test it for fit. It's obviously gonna go in and out a bunch of times yet before I put it in for the last time, so I'm not gonna Loctite anything right now or anything like that. I just wanna make sure that our holes line up and everything fits. And we'll take our screws. And of course I didn't bring an Allen wrench to the car, so I got to go and get an 1/8 inch Allen wrench. Okay, forgot to turn the camera back on, so I've got one started, and now we're gonna hope that this one lines up. And there we go. Bolted down and tight and secure, and we don't have to worry about it. Easy to work on, no nuts on the backside to have to hold or anything like that. Much more secure than using like self-tapping screws or something like that. So this is my preferred method to mount this kind of stuff, and it's not the only way to do it, but it's the way I like to do it. And I just like to make sure that things are, you know, one less thing to worry about when I'm driving the car on the racetrack or, you know, track to track or whatever. This block's not going to fall off the firewall and so on and so forth. Of course, this is going to get Loctited down when I install it for the last time, but this will be in and out of the car several times before then. So I just wanted to give you a kind of quick way I do this. And yes, it's finicky and it takes some time, and you know, I could do it much faster, but like everything else that we've talked about here, I'm not getting paid by the hour. I'm not charging a customer by the hour. This is for me, my car, my way. I don't care how long it takes. It'll be done the way I like it. So anyway, just wanted to show you that, and thanks for watching, everybody. I appreciate it. If you got any comments or suggestions for other stuff you'd like to see, let me know, and I'll bring you back probably when we go over and work on the new alternator belt tensioning method on the motor block. So I'll bring you over there when we get there. So I've got the trunk supports mounted, and I think they're going to be good. It takes a fair amount of force to pull that down. That should hold the trunk lid up, I think, fairly easily. And so what I did, the car originally had big torsion springs that went from one side to the other, and they're just in the way, and I had to cut a bunch of structure out that they used. And so anyway, none of that worked anymore. So what I did was I just fabricated some brackets and mounts for a standard gas-filled strut and attached that. Let's see if I can pull the light back here so you can see what I'm talking about. Attach that to there, attached it in the back to the bracket, and welded the brackets on back there. And so now we'll have just regular, out of the way gas struts that should support the trunk, and everything should be good there. So hopefully that all is going to work good once we get the trunk lid back on it, but just wanted to kind of show you that. I still need to install a light switch for the trunk lid, but I'm unsure as to what the height of this needs to be. So I'm going to wait until I get the trunk lid and then buy a switch that screws into this original factory fitting and is adjustable. So I just don't have that switch handy right now. But anyway, I just figured I'd give you a quick update on that. Got the fuel cells all back in. All of that stuff's done. So we just keep moving ahead. So thanks very much for watching. Appreciate you. Hit the like button, comment, subscribe. It'd be great to hear from you. Thanks again. We'll catch you next time.